What up, what up, what up? Welcome to this week's episode of Pels Pod, a New Orleans Network podcast. As always, I am your host, Raphael Rattler, joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrick Raphel. What's poppin' with you, bro?
What up, man? How's everything on your end? Everything's good over here. We got some good basketball taking place. Sort of good basketball taking place. The Pels, this the postseason, I guess, is here. The vibes in the city are everybody's like, what's happening? Like I said before the game last time, it was cautious fear, appropriate fear. And I think that's what's the vibe in the city right now. But it's unseasonably cold. There's that as well. So it's kind of weird going on. But it was a grateful Easter break. Happy Easter to everybody who celebrated. Happy Passover to everybody who celebrated as well. It's all good over here, man. How's everything on your side?
Absolutely. Same way. Blessed. Great Easter weekend. Had a lot of fun with the kids, watched a lot of basketball, some good, some bad, to your point, which we'll get into. But before we get too far on the show, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at Pels Pods, follow us on IG at Pels Pod, like the episode below, and most importantly, subscribe to New Orleans Network. So before we get into the basketball side of things, we talked last week about how things seem to be rounding into shape for the Pels, things to be turned around, and then the Zion news breaks that not only is he not playing the remainder of the season, he's not playing in the play-in either. Then today, there was a report from Sham saying that the organization doesn't necessarily think he's close. He's not available anytime soon. Now, the update was supposed to come on Tuesday of last week. It did not. There was more of a we don't really know anything. There's not really an update. Like, nothing has changed. I'm not sure why it was released. They should have just not said anything.
The update was no update.
Right. They should have just not said anything at all. But the next day, Griff held a press conference with the media, trying to clear up some things, like doing his best to, in his very Griff way, articulate that basically they have certain parameters they want Zion to meet from a physical standpoint, from a conditioning standpoint, that he has not met. And on the flip side, also alluding to the fact that he doesn't feel right. He doesn't feel confident. And for that reason, neither side feels confident with him getting on the court. So my first question to you, before we jump into anything, is like, do you have a problem with how the team has handled Zion injury news? Because he's been out for a long amount of time for an injury that typically doesn't take as much time, but he re-injured it and nobody knows the severity in which that happened. And then it's just kind of been week to week, or bi-weekly each month since then. And now you get this news. So do you have an issue with how it's been handled in terms of what the fans have received and what everyone has received outside of the team and Zion?
First things first, what up, Energy Slayer? What up, Kendall Jones? Appreciate y'all pulling up. As always, appreciate the support. So how the team has handled the Zion news. I am a bit turned off by it. I would say, listen, the Pelicans are a small market trying to deal with this mega star. People forget Zion came into the league with 2 million followers on Instagram and just ridiculous amounts of notoriety and things like that. And so they're trying to deal with this mega star, and it hasn't been great. Listen, the injuries are the injuries, right? It is what it is, but I think the Pelicans are trying to straddle a line between being a respectable and reputable organization while also kind of falling into pressures of releasing information and things like that. There's a lot of stars who have been injured. And you don't get these bi-weekly updates or these daily updates. Obviously, they don't have the pull of Zion, right? Paul George has been injured for a while, and nobody asks about when he's coming back and things like that. And at least to the severity of asking about Zion and wondering about Zion. Same thing with guys like Damian Lillard, who's just been out for God knows how long. It's a situation where Zion has a different cachet. But where I think the Pelicans have fumbled this is that, you have to get ahead of things. But if there's no update, right? If there's no update, you have to understand that there's going to be a side eye to you until Zion gets on the floor. No matter what you say, right? You could come out and say, man, the man is warming up and he messed something up, and it's not the Pelicans' fault at all. It was something that happened with Zion. But you don't do that, right? You allow the kind of things to go on, the rumors to go on, and then you come out and give up an update. You delay the update, and then you come out with an update that is not an update. And I do believe that the update came out because Shams, right? Because Shams got ahead of it and dropped the news, and then it was damage control at that point. And so, the Pelicans obviously could do a lot of things, better as far as how they're handling the situation. But I think the one thing that what they could have done is just, tell people what it is, right? Tell people what it is, get ahead of it, understand that the media scrutiny that's going to be on you, whether it be from fans, whether it be from the national media, whether it be from local media, whatever the case is, it's going to happen, right? Until the man gets on the floor, you're going to feel that, that wrath, regardless of what you say. So get out, tell the truth about what's going on. I just don't understand why, it benefits everybody involved, right? If you just get out and say what's going on. You just say what you need to say about Zion, and now nobody's questioning where Zion is or what Zion is doing. If you get out and say what you need to say, nobody's questioning if the organization is holding things. If you get out, it looks better on Griff. It looks better on the medical staff. If you just get out and say it, well, when you hold this information in and they come out with these vague updates, it's just like, well, what was the point of, what is being hidden and things, and ugly history starts to resurface and things like that. And so I just think that, with the Pelicans trying to walk a fine line, and being a respectable franchise that is dealing with this megastar while also keeping things in house and things like that. I think that they're not really moving this the right way. It sucks because they don't have anything to do with Zion pulling his hamstring. But I think this recovery and the coming back is what's the issue for most fans and for most people around who's following the team.
I hear you. And I understand it, but again, I'm a student of history. And to your point, there are a lot of players, superstar players, that handle their injury news separately. Like, for example, like LeBron went and saw the LeBron of ankle doctors, and nobody knows who that is. And he was like, if I had surgery, y'all wouldn't know anyways. I believe him. The one that comes to mind for me is Kawhi Leonard. Nobody ever knows it. Kawhi had a torn ACL in the playoffs, and the Clippers were like, yeah, he's game to game. And like everyone's like, wait a minute, Kawhi's not coming back on the court. What are you talking about? Because he handles it a certain way. And so like I caution people to like rush down the front office's throat in terms of like what you're releasing, what you're not releasing, because you don't know what Zion's team and what they've agreed to in terms of what they want released. Like maybe they don't want everybody to know this and that and the other. Christian Clark reported there was an injury in the bubble that nobody knew about years ago. So like, how do you know what they're okay or what they want to release, what they want to say versus what the player wants or what the players camp, what the players agents want to say? To your point, it's a slippery slope juggling a megastar talent, especially with the highs that you see from Zion, but also the lows from the injury standpoint. That's a tough thing to handle. And so, from my perspective, I think the question should revert back to, okay, well, maybe they're not handling the best way. Maybe transparency is something they're not afforded, and this is the position and the cards that they're dealt. But like, do you disagree with how the team is handling Zion personally? Like they're being extra cautious. They're going through extra conditioning milestones to be able to reach certain points. That like they're not letting him play hurts or work his way back. Like they want certain things, and I think as the narrative has changed over the week and over the past couple months, and now people are like trade Zion, and this is unbelievable and things like that. Well, if you're the Pelicans, you just said it. Like you're in a small market, and CJ came out and talked about it in an interview. It's like you have to draft well because you're not a free agent destination. And so if you happen to get the number 1 pick and happen to get it the year where there's a generational talent involved, you're going to do everything possible to keep that generational talent around. Like people are like, trade him. Okay, show me the trade simulators for Zion Williamson. Show me a trade in which you're not like, show me a trade where there's like, oh, we getting that guy back. I don't think that exists. And so you really are speaking out of both sides when you're like, I hate how the organization was handling it. Get rid of them. But then you're like, well, present a solution versus a problem, and nobody has the solution, right? And so, like, to your point, like, do you have an issue with how he's being handled and how he's being treated based off the information that the team has?
So, in my opinion, as hard as it is, and listen, nobody wants to see Zion on the floor more than Pel's Pod, right? It is a different game when Zion is playing. But the reason the Pelicans were the number 1 team in the West is because of Zion Williamson. And again, I just keep going back to watching Devin Booker come out and score 58 points and then miss like 25 games afterwards because of his hamstring. I look at Maxi Kleber, who has made a miraculous recovery, but who tore his hamstring. I think, with the Pelicans having so little time to get these guys on the floor, I personally, I think if it's get him in, and maybe, the Pelicans weren't undefeated when he was playing. They lost some games. You go in and you hope and pray to God that Zion's hamstring is great, and you make this miraculous run in this open West. And that's the high end, right? That's the ceiling. But the floor of him getting out there and making one wrong move, and now next season is in question. He's spending another offseason rehabbing, not getting better, not adding to the game, rehabbing another hamstring for a play-in game. I get the plan for Zion. As I know, I hate it. I understand why people are frustrated with the medical staff, with the front office, with everything. If Zion Williamson isn't in the correct game shape to come back on if he is saying that this hamstring doesn't feel right, I would much rather say, okay, this year sucked. I wish Zion could have played and Brandon Ingram could have played. I wish it would have went well. I wish the Pelicans would, but don't damage next season. Don't damage what might happen next season if it means that you get a game or 2 or 4 or 5 of Zion. And coming back from not playing low intensity 3-on-3 basketball to playing intensity basketball to playoff intensity basketball, it's just very tough to do that. It's just tough, right? We saw Kevin Durant, who's one of the greatest players of all time. LeBron James, who's one of the greatest players of all time, struggle on their recovery back, come back and have a couple of off games before they got themselves right. And it's the play-in tournament, right? You can't have an off game. So I get it, right? I understand it. And so I'm not necessarily upset about it because I understand the dynamic that Zion is, and I understand there's a lot of runway, left for Zion's career, Brandon Ingram's career, Trey Murphy's career, Herb Jones's career. There's a lot of runway left. But I understand the frustration, but I don't think if he's not right, you don't put him out there on the floor.
I 100% agree. Like the thing that I'm like, if he thinks he can go, like, do you risk it? But as soon as they were like, there's hesitation, and it's obvious, and it's hesitation come from him, and he don't feel right. I'm like, if a player's telling you they're not right, that's something you should probably believe in. Like, especially a player who wants to play so bad and is hesitant. To your point, in the playoffs and the play, you don't have time for that. Like, as great as you may be, if you're not operating as best as you can with full confidence, the playoffs ain't the place for you, right? And so,
let me ask you this, right before you go in. Let me ask you this, because I was listening to a podcast. I think it was Brian Windhorst. I think that's who it was, and they were talking about. Oh no, I'm sorry. This was on the broadcast, and they were talking about like Joel Embiid coming back and saying, "Hey, look," telling the front office or telling the medical staff, "I don't care what you say, I'm playing," and like, you know, basically forcing himself on the court. So, do you think that Zion is not doing that because he's injured, like? Or do you think that maybe he is going to the front office and the medical staff is shutting him down? Like, if Zion really, really was like, I'm playing regardless of what you're saying, do you think that the Pelicans would say, no, you're not playing, the way the Philadelphia 76ers have seemed to not have done with Joel Embiid?
I'm going to go on a limb. I think the Pelican staff would still hold him back. I mean, again, it's crazy that we're in this, the Pels are in the 9th seed, they're hosting a play-in game, and then they got to go. You know, I feel as if last year he thought he could play. Like, hey, I may not be in, you know, the best shape possible. I may not be all the way back, but I can contribute. And him, you know, taking videos of him doing 360 windmills in practice, trying to inch his way back to the court. I think that was the scenario of him saying, I can play, and the Pelicans saying, no, you're not. I think this is different. I think the Pelicans want him to play, but he's like, something's not right. And so both sides are like, you're not playing. I think this is a different situation, right? I just, from what I can see, but to answer your question, I do think the Pels would kind of put their foot down and say, we're going to do what's best for the player, not what's best necessarily for the team right now. That being said, I do want to talk about the team. Like, the first question I want to ask is, like, do you think the team struggled with this week? Because, like, if you really looked at things and, like, look at that Kings game. The Kings game kind of set it all up, right? They started the week in terms of, hey, you got to win out to have a shot at 6 seed. You lose versus the Kings in a really, like, depleting way because the Kings really didn't have much to play for, but they came in and they put the Pels to work on their home floor. And then, like, you play a close, crazy game versus Memphis, who's not like Ja. And then you play like a low energy game versus the Knicks, like D team. And like, it just felt as if they didn't play with the same type of energy that they did in prior weeks that got them to this spot. And like, even Trey talked about it in an interview. I think Will Guillory asked him a question like, how do you keep Zion up mentally? And how do you keep the team up mentally when he's missed so much time and all he wants to do is play and join the team? And how does the team like deal with the fact that like, oh, like our best player is coming back and we're about to make a run. Oh, wait, no, he's not. Like the last week of the season. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot. Like, do you think the team struggled with them with that particular piece?
I mean, listen, it's always deflating, you know, when you hear that your best player who's been working hard and doesn't, you know, and is around the team, and then you hear like he suffered a setback and he won't be back. And I think, you know, you got to remember, like, these guys are basketball fans and teammates of him. You know, the same way the fans are fans of basketball. And, you know, when you don't have this guy around and have him on the floor, we all remember the video of Jose Alvarado sitting next to Zion saying, we got him, right? Like we all, like, they are aware of what the talent that Zion is. And so when you hear, hey, look, fellas, like, you know, the whole city, right? The city, every Pelicans fan, it felt like everybody was like, all right, we're working to this a certain week where we're going to get that update that he's going to be ramping up. And I'm sure that the team felt that way, right? At least the people who were not all the way tuned into Zion's injuries and stuff. And when you hear rumors and that the week that you've been working up to, that date you've been working up to get that update that the big fella's coming back, you get the opposite, right? You get, hey, he's not coming back, and he probably is not coming back the rest of the season. I do think it takes a toll, right? It does take a toll. And, it's a little bit of a credence to Brandon Ingram, right? Just that the leadership that has to have happened again in like you talk about the same situation, right? Coming back from an injury, Zion's not there. You have to go through the play-in tournament. You're coming off a long, like a nice run in the end of the season. It's a credit to him, being able to kind of galvanize the guys and kind of snatch it back enough to at least make the play-in tournament, right? They had to win a couple of games, that Clippers game, and keep them keep them in possession or keep them in contention to get a 5-6 seed even until the last game of the season. And so I do think that they struggled a bit, and it was a letdown for them, just like it was a letdown for, the city of New Orleans, the Pels fans, and everybody else.
Right. The thing I look at is like, I don't know if you can blame them. Like, as good as the team has looked at times, the game versus Minnesota and like their best players' absence, availability, kind of juggling all throughout the year to both their best players. I think you just have to remember how young this team is, because again, it's different when your role players and the guys you need to step up and play bigger roles are like 10-year vets, 8-year vets, and you know what you're getting, versus like 2-year vets and 3-year vets and 4-year vets. Like, I think it's easy for those guys to let other pieces creep in and like at the end of games, let things whittle out of control and things like that, because you have a young team that hasn't been in those high pressure stakes. Like, yeah, you had a run last year and stuff like that, but you really haven't been through years worth of adversity. Like, some people go multiple years without even sniffing the playoffs. Like, Josh Hart's first time playing in a playoff series is this season, and he's been in the league for like 7 years. Like, it takes guys some time to build that. And again, when you have slippages, and I know everyone's so tied to every game and everything that happens, like, you got to put in perspective what the Pelicans roster is versus what the rest of the West looks like. When you're talking about Kyle Anderson and you're talking about, guys who have played playoff games before and
Mike Conley.
Been there, right? Been in there. Like, it's difficult to, just throw the absences away, but you also want to acknowledge that, like, hey, these are young guys. You have to fail sometimes. Like, Steph Curry didn't come into the league winning championships. Neither did LeBron James. Neither did Dwayne Wade. Like, most teams don't win in their first couple years of being put together. And like, in some scenarios, you jump the gun and you go a little too fast, and you do have some winning, and you get to the Western Conference Finals, and then next year you don't make the play-in. Right, like there are scenarios like that, and so like building things up the right way, I think matters. And I see a lot of people saying like the coaches aren't pushing them and the training staff. Were you saying those same things when they were going like 8-game win streaks without their best player? Like, were you doing that as well? Like, you got to give credit where credit's due, but also again knock them when they fall short as well, as clear as that can be. And speaking of that, like, we got to talk a little bit about the in-game adjustment with who is available, right? Because for as much as, the Kings game didn't go the way they wanted to, the Memphis game was all over the place. The Minnesota game, there were some missteps. Like, let's just call it what it is. Let's be blunt. Like, you want to give credit to Willie Green for holding down the ship, during this last, 10, 12 games and getting the team back on board to where they're in a chance to, make it to the playoffs. But we got to call out some of the things that weren't great as well. So, like, the obvious, CJ struggled. Like, here's where you and I have talked about Willie Green has a tendency to lean on veterans. And, to his credit, a lot of the league tends to lean on veterans because they know what you're going to get. They're going to be in the right place. But, like, there are some times where I think Willie Green has a super long leash on veterans, especially players like CJ, where they aren't held to the same standard. Like, if Kyra would have made some of those mistakes, he is out of there immediately. If Dyson makes that mistake, he is out of there immediately. And I understand, like, needing a guy like CJ because he's one of the only other players that can kind of create for themselves. But at sometimes you got to be able to call those guys out too. Like, there were some questionable shots. He went 0 for 2 from the free throw line in a clutch situation where he missed a bunny and one possession before. Like, the bad turnover right off the missed, and then like the blocked layup attempt versus a much more athletic guy at the rim. Like, there was some bad play, and I don't know if the accountability piece were there. So, like, where's your head at as far as, like, what adjustments were made and what things were done during that game that was so pivotal to the season?
I'm pointing directly at Jonas Valanciunas. I am pointing square at Jonas Valanciunas. Listen to me. Karl Anthony Towns played at least a quarter and a half with five fouls. You lose Rudy Gobert to a civil war. You lose Nasri before the game started. He's not playing. And Cat goes down with 5 fouls. Going back to your point about the leash on veterans, it happens to everybody except JV. JV he got treated, and before the little 10 game after the meeting run, he gets treated like a rookie, a young player, because JV to be fair, there was a play. Kyle Anderson was guarding him. He got the ball and he brought it down. He got fouled so bad that his nose started bleeding.
They didn't call it.
Willie, they didn't call a foul. It was a turnover. Went back. The Timberwolves went back down and scored. Now, that's a turning point for the game right then and there. That play, because if you leave JV in, you allow him to be angry and upset, and you make the Timberwolves say, "Do that again, do it again, do it again." But instead, he went to Larry Nance, who, for the latter part of this season, has looked like a guy who is giving the team what he can give them, because he looks hurt. He looks like everything hurts. And whenever he tries to do anything, it looks like it hurts. You see him missing layups and dunks, and you see him missing like hook shots that he usually, because he can't get the lift. I saw him in the middle of the game kind of like look at the bench like, and kind of like like a slow jog up the court. And I'm like, am I the only person who sees this? And listen, Jackson Hayes has a lot of faults. He has a lot of things that he needs to work on to continue his career as an NBA player. What he does not need to work on is being 7 feet tall. He has that down pat. That is a skill that he has mastered, being 7 feet tall. When you have Kyle Anderson out there playing 5, and okay, you want to take David out because he way in the world that the injured version of Larry Nance is a better option than what Jackson Hayes could have given you. I would have left JV in the game and made Minnesota make them have to guard him over and over again. Even when Cat comes back in, feed the ball to JV. I thought the meeting addressed this, right? I thought this was something that was addressed because they started playing through JV. But in one of the most, not most important game, but a huge game, last game of the season, with all of Minnesota's big men out, you decided to come down to their level and play to their strengths. And that's just something that egregious, right? That is something that should not have happened. It's the best way I can put it. And again, we give on this podcast, on this show, we give Willie Green a lot of credit for having a short hand and things. But I've always said that there are in-game things that Willie Green does that you have to question. Things that I can see, you can see, the other team can see, but it seems like Willie Green can't see. And so that was one of them that I just could not understand how you would play down to their level, play down to the thing that makes them work. Fine. Karl Anthony Towns is coming down, hitting 30-footers. That has nothing to do with JV being slow. That he just making a shot. JV can contest the 3 out there. It's driving past.
Larry Nance he was getting J'd too. So yeah.
And as I sent you that morning, Larry Nance is 6'7". He will never ever be 7 foot 6'10". He will never be that guy. And so if you got all of these factors going in, just JV not being on the floor for those last couple games, those last couple minutes, and then to bring him in when you need a rebound, I can see him being very frustrated about that. He finished with a plus minus in a game that the Pelicans lost, and he only played like 22 minutes. I just think that was a mistake and something that Willie Green If they do get a chance to play Minnesota again, if they take care of the things at OKC, he needs to go back and watch that film and see how being stuck in his ways caused them, I think, to lose that game.
Yeah, and again, the obvious counter to that is, well, he was getting cooked. His cat was just coming to the 3-point line, had him a stumble dribble, and then doing his travel Euro step where he takes 3 steps from the 3-point line to the goal, and JV couldn't guard that. I get that. Totally get that. But to your point, when Brandon Ingram is seeing 4 guys, every time you got Ant Edwards playing the defense of his life, and you got everybody with eyes on him, if JV's not in the game, where is your other, and CJ doesn't have it going, where is your other threat? So, like, to your point, your advantage is to play big and to make them play bigger, even though they didn't have the bodies to do that, even if you were giving up some on the offensive end because you couldn't score during that stretch. So I'm with you on that. The other thing I look at is, I think, again, Josh Richardson has been a good fit for this team since joining this team. He's given them something extra off the bench that they didn't have before. But what have we talked about all season long? The bench on this team is a bunch of hard-nosed defensive guys who can have different skill sets offensively that they can give you every night. But their skill sets are all about the same. They're different, but the same. Josh Richardson, for wanting to play vets, we talk about wanting to play vets, and we talk about wanting because they know how. He made some awful decisions, had some terrible air balls. It was giving me Tony Snell vibes from the Clippers game last year, where it was a small sample size of time where you're like, this cannot be happening. Like, when he pulled up for the contested 3 with like 2 minutes left in the game, down 1, I was like, oh no, surely he's going to take it out after this. And it didn't. And so, to your point, like, there's a longer leash, even with a player who hasn't even been on the roster for a long time. And you know, we talk about the Pels having such a deep bench, to not even like look at Dyson. I get why. Like, Dyson was struggling offensively, bringing the ball up. He had some turnovers, but like, there's things that he can offer from a defense perspective, at least, right? And if Jay Rich was 1 for 6, that can't be too much better than what Dyson would have gave you too. So, like,
or Kyra.
I worry about it there. And then you make up a good point. Larry Nance is obviously injured, and again, you want to give all the respect in the world to a player like that who he knows he's not right. And again, like, these are players' livelihoods. This is their business. We talk about it, and fans look at the game, and media looks at the game, and you're making judgments off the game. But, like, at the end of the day, this is how people feed their families. And so, like, if someone's like, hey, I'm not right, and then playing on it make me worse, and I'm going to look worse, and my contract negotiations are going to be worse, and the next team's not going to want me, like, you kind of get it when teams are like, I only want to get out there if I'm at my best. You got to respect people making decisions for their family. Larry Nance is the opposite. If he could go, he wants to go. But there's been times where, to your point, as injured as Larry is, I don't think an injured Larry is giving you what you think you'd be getting out of like a Jackson, probably not a Billy, because he struggles with the same thing that JV does. And like, he may be injured now. Like, the reason why the Pels went to the small ball 5 and Herb at the 5, Willie Green said they went to Herb at the 5 because they looked at Larry and he looked like he wasn't looking right. And he was looking at the bench, to your point, like, hey, something's not right. He's been struggling for a long time. Like, it wasn't just the Minnesota game. Like, it's been tough to watch him get off of the floor. Like, whether it's an alley-oop or whether it's a dump-off pass at a dunker spot, whether it's to block, whether it's to box out and get a rebound. Like, it's been tough for him. And again, he's given it everything he has. But are you, by condensing the roster a couple weeks ago and just totally getting rid of a Kyra, totally getting rid of a Jackson, now it's like, well, can you go back to the young players after not playing them for a month? Like, Jackson hasn't played meaningful minutes in like since March. So, or since February. Like, then you look even more crazy. It's like, hey, you throwing this guy out there, you're just throwing anything at that point. And so that's what kind of, you know, my issues are. And now, like, if Larry's hurt and like can't play, then what? Like, is the small ball 5 Herb like your new backup? Like, what are your thoughts on how do you manage Larry's, you know, effectiveness?
Well, if Larry can't play and he's absent, especially against an OKC team that starts off small. They start off small. Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Jalen Williams, shout out to the Woo Pigs. Those guys are small, right? And if against that team, you have to play a Jackson Hayes. And I think Jackson being and Cairo to an extent Jackson being the enigma that he is, I think that would benefit him, because I don't think Jackson knows any better than to come out and be Jackson. I don't think he would shy away from. Jackson had 20 points in a playoff game last year when he kept leaking out on Phoenix over and over again. Jackson's he's just a guy that I think you can put him out there, and because he's rim runs and be athletic, I don't think that him sitting will rust that a little bit. I think Kyra would be fine putting him in a game as well, just because he's so steady and calm. You don't really see any emotion from Kyra ever. And I think that if you put him in, listen, he's got speed, and you can give, if Josh Richardson isn't giving you that, Kyra can play the passing lanes. He can get those defensive steals. No, he might not be as tall as Josh Richardson and be able to stay, but there's not a lot of big, huge guys on this OKC team. You talk about Shea, who's very slender. Talk about Jalen Williams, who's very slender. Obviously, Dort will be dealing with Brandon Ingram, and that won't be there. But there's a lot of slender guys on that team. Kenrich Williams, a lot of thin guys. And so I say, listen, if Larry, I think that Larry Jackson should have played against Minnesota, especially when Kyle Anderson was the center. You could have still played small-ish, big-ish ball and enjoyed the benefits of both with Jackson playing. But I think for this game, for sure, if Larry Nance can't go, you don't have a choice, right? You don't have a choice but to throw him out there. Maybe you throw Willie Hernangomez out there. I see some people suggesting, throwing Willie Hernangomez. Maybe you do give that a shot. That's also an option, because he can do a lot of things that JV does, meaning take up the space and be a bigger guy on some of those smaller players. But I think that you have to feature Jonas Valanciunas early and often. And I think if Larry's not going to play, you have to play Jackson Hayes because Herb can't be your starting guard, play all the defense on Shea, and then when JV sits down, also slide to backup center. And then when Shea gets back in the game, also slide to guard and then have to guard Shea. You're asking a lot from a second-year player to do that, especially in these primetime games. So I think that you have to look at Jackson. You have to look at your bench. You call it we labeled this one of the deepest teams in the league. Show it.
All right. I mean, again, not to harp on a down moment, but Larry hasn't scored 10 points since coming back from injury. In any game. Jackson's last 4 games are meaningful, but he has 10 points in all of them. So he gives you a different threat, especially when Larry can't get off the ground. All those pick and rolls, when they don't really care about the roll man, they're just doubling BI off the pick. You can't do that with Jackson. You have to have someone drop back and protect the rim, because if he's going to do anything, it's going to be dunking the ball, right? And so he gives you a threat there. We've talked about all year. He's the best rim protector on the team. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but he's the best person to protect the rim on the team. So he just gives you a different element, and yeah, he's unpredictable and things like that. But when you're not getting a whole lot, it's not like you're getting a whole lot of rebounds, or you're having veterans make mistakes. You're not getting what you thought you're getting out of veterans, for them to be solid and to be certain things. To your point, sometimes you're forced to play cards that you have, right? And so we talk about that. You've kind of seen the weaknesses. We talked about, before the week, can they go undefeated? And I'm I don't know. The game I was most worried about was the Kings, because the Pelicans struggle versus teams that can score, because the Pelicans struggle to score. As good as their defense is, what is the best offense, right? Offense beats better defense, right? And so where is it going to come from? BI immediately after game looked at the stat sheet and was yeah, we got to get Trey more looks. And, Trey's done a really good job. In the ascension of Trey Murphy is the reason why the Pelicans are in the 9th seed right now. Because if he had not been, him and CJ are both averaging 21 points per game since the beginning of March. If Trey had not taken this next step, I don't think we're talking about this right now. I think that things go south, because as great as BI has been, there's just not a whole lot of guys who can score consistently, and Trey has elevated to that. And like a question was posed to Willie, I think again it was by Will, like, hey, have you guys looked at the pick and rolls? Seems to be excelling there, and at the end of shot clocks, he's forced to attack the basket or attack someone who's on a hard closeout. And Willie's like, yeah, we haven't even been looking at that. Like my question to you was like, do they need to start looking at that? Because like right now, it's either BI in the pick and roll. Every now and then you give the ball to JV or CJ in the pick and roll, which hasn't been great as of late. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so Zach Lowe had a conversation on his podcast. Once again, great podcast to listen to. And he was talking about Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, right? And he was saying that like Karl Anthony Towns could not have seen Anthony Edwards coming. He had just got comfortable, just got into like a bit of a role. And then here comes Anthony as like the guy. And then here comes Anthony Edwards like, nah, I'm the guy now. And so it puts him in I believe that's true for like CJ and Trey. And I'm going to go a step further and say, I think that Trey needs to get the second most shots on the team with Zion out right now. I think that he and CJ's hierarchy as far as like shot attempts, they need to switch because Trey Murphy's ability to I call him a walking conundrum because he's a 40% three-point shooter or scratching the surface of 40% three-point shooter, but he's a guy that's one dribble and I'm putting you on a poster. And so that's very hard to guard. And so when you give him more opportunities to shoot, right? Again, I spoke about this on a previous pod. You see is what happens when Mikal Bridges gets empowered to score. And I'm not saying throw the ball to Trey Murphy and let him just be ISO and let him just go crazy like Mikal Bridges is doing in Brooklyn. That's not what I'm saying doing. But they're empowering him to take more shots, take more ownership. Hey, you get a one-on-one, don't look for Brandon Ingram. Don't look for CJ. If you think you can take him, take him. Don't look. Don't look for anybody. Don't just go. Do what you do and don't worry about if you make a miss. And Mikal Bridges is making more. I think Trey Murphy is very much a clone copy of that. Like, just go, attack, and take the shots that are open. Stop looking for Brandon Ingram. Stop looking for CJ. Stop looking for JV. If you have the ball in your hand, it's probably a good idea for you to get a shot attempt. Now, save for the last shot, right? We're still working on late game execution.
I don't know. I thought that was a foul.
No, it definitely was.
I'll put it the other way. I have seen the Pelicans call for that same foul.
Yes, like Herb Jones said to the ref, could you let me be that physical as well? But no, it definitely was a foul. I just think that there was a lot of time left on the clock. You could have came back to that shot. But again, if other than that, like if you have the ball, Trey Murphy you're probably going to get the best shot of the possession. Unless you're throwing the ball back to BI, letting him go 1-on-2, 1-on-1, whatever the case is. But I say all that to say, I think that Trey Murphy's ascension has warranted more shots. He has warranted more of a focus in the offense. And, Brandon Ingram is seeing it. And I just think that, what CJ was brought in to do, right? To be that, behind Zion and Brandon Ingram, oh God, you got to guard this guy as well. And like, that's what he was brought into. But I don't think anyone saw Trey Murphy becoming a 40% point three-point shooter, as well as somebody who can take you off the dribble and dunk. And now he's starting to come around a little bit. Still got some work to do, but he's starting to come around a little bit where he's not like a sore thumb on defense. And so as he continues to fill out and learn that side of the ball, I think that his ascension has warranted him taking over CJ's shot as far as like as far as like shot hierarchy on the team is while Zion is out. And even when Zion gets back, I think that he's the guy that, okay, can we get this guy 15, 16 shots? Can we get this guy, 8 threes, 9 threes? Can we run plays to get him open, and dribble handoffs and pick and roll in situations like that? I think that Trey Murphy has earned a spot to go up and be the second, the second fiddle in the offense.
I agree with you. And, the sad part about it is like, although Dyson doesn't really have an offensive game quite yet, like in terms of like things he's going to score on, he does a little spin move, which is always weird looking, but I've watched some Australian basketball and like that's something that they do. So like maybe, that's it. But other than that, he doesn't really have an offensive game. But what he's able to do is he's a connector. Like he has the Lonzo factor where if things are moving in motion, he's constantly pushing the pace. Something that Willie Green said in terms of like the collapse versus Minnesota is like we started playing slow. They started bringing the ball up slow and getting in the sets with 12 seconds left on the shot clock, and here comes the double on BI. Whereas when Dice is in the game, like he gets the ball off the rim and immediately starts dribbling. Like he is looking for BI and everything like that, but he's trying to push the pace. And so like you have that, and you talked about Kyra, like, you know, when you've got those guys at your disposal, at this point, it makes no sense to go out without swinging and trying anything. Like to just go out the way that you came in and make no adjustments, like that's difficult to look at. And like Najee has cooled off recently as well. And so to your point, I agree. Like Trey has been doing some other things to get the ball, and we talk about his movement without the ball. But all in all, like the Pelicans just have to be a well-oiled team on offense because they have to move the ball. They have to search for the best shot, because if you just go ISO one-on-one, you're going to have exactly what happened to BI in the last game. BI goes ridiculous, but who else is going ridiculous as well, right? Like if you're not finding good shots for everyone else, eventually BI is going to get tired and get doubled. And then if no one else has it going at that point, where are you going to score, right? Especially if your second best gravitational pull is on the bench because you want to play small, right? So again, it's going to have to be a Pelicans answer. Do you have what you have? I still believe they have enough to get to the playoffs. It's just, are you willing to do the small things like the box outs at the free throw? That's ridiculous. Like small things like that, you have to. Your margin of error is very low. Like you talk about Cat and Anthony Edwards. Well, Brandon Ingram was incredible last game, but who was his running mate, right? Like Trey had a good game points-wise, but like he had 9 shots. Like at some point, someone else has to have a good game. We talk about like the depth and the quality of this bench. Well, like if every possession is just ISO and then wait for one of those guys to shoot a late contested three, that's not what they do best. That's not what makes them excel. Drawing gravity and kicking out to wide open threes is more what you would like to see from them. So again, it's on the Pelicans to figure things out, but they've got a big matchup, you know, versus a Thunder's team, which they've been 3-1 so far this year head to head. Like, and it's all been different. Like the first game, the Pels win, there's Zion, but no Brandon Ingram. The second game, the Pels win, there's no Zion or Brandon Ingram. The third game, the Pels win, there's no Zion. And just recently, the Thunder blew the brakes off the Pelicans in the Smoothie King City, and there was no Zion either. So, like, it's all looked different, but they've been close games, 5-point game, 3-point game, 3-point game, except for this last one. And so, since the things that have happened since the beginning of the season, like Jalen Williams and Isaiah Joe have come like really important role players for that OKC team. Shai's played at all NBA level. You know, shouts out to him and shouts out to his growth, but he's had help, right? He's had growth in other players as well. And so talk to me about some of the keys to victory as you look at this do or die matchup happening on Wednesday night in the Smoothie King Center.
Yeah, I think the first thing you need to understand is that, you know, you have the size advantage on pretty much every up and down the roster. You have the size advantage, even down to like Shai Gilgeous and CJ. Like CJ is a stockier guy, Shai is a thinner guy, and you want to attack that, right? You want to make sure that you're using the size advantage, using JV the way he should be used. Get him established early, because OKC, if you allow them to play small and let Jalen Williams guard JV, Jalen Williams can shoot from the 3-point line fairly well. And I'm talking about big man Jalen Williams. He can shoot from the 3-point line.
Finest. Yes, sir.
Right, exactly. And so I think that, if you allow him to just not do anything on defense and then come out and play pick and roll, pick and pop with Shai, I think he could be really, really effective against JV. So you have to punish them. You have to make sure that you're punishing them, play at the rim, and make them guard you. And I think one other thing that you want to do, you want to make Shai guard, right? You want to make him guard. You want to put him in actions where he's switched on to Brandon Ingram, where he's switched on to CJ. Don't let him just sit in the corner and guard Herb Jones and things like that. Don't let him get away with that, right? Trey Murphy, attack him, find him and make him guard. See if you can get him in foul trouble early. The play-in tournament, when you're talking about one game, it's not about, what is the consistent thing that we do all the time? What can we do? It's about finding a matchup, attacking it and exploiting it, and making other teams adjust, right? Making teams adjust. Trust me, If they can get a JV in a pick and roll over and over again, they will. Shea will play and pick and roll with JV the entire game if they need to. So the Pelicans need to make sure that they're establishing JV, making sure that they know that they have to have the guy guarding him and at least one other pair of eyes that when he catches the ball, they have to double so that JV can go up and score or make the outlet pass. And don't take him out if he gets ripped or fouled and doesn't, make the play. Let him play through it. Let him learn that, okay, they're reaching for this down here. I bet you the next time he come down, they won't do it. Don't just take him out and then try to go with a small ball lineup and try to play down to them. Lean on your advantage. Continue to play through it. And I think that the Pelicans, like you said, they have enough top-end talent. They have enough help around Brandon Ingram and CJ in the likes of Trey Murphy and CJ McCollum and things like that. So I think that they have the pieces there. You just have to play to your advantage, and you have to make Shea guard and see if you could get him in foul trouble.
I agree with you. I think that you have to own the paint, right? The OKC, they're third in paint points in the NBA this season. A lot of that has to do with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. It's not their big man just crushing the boards. In fact, they're dead last in the NBA in second chance points. You know what that screams to me? This should be a big Jonas Valanciunas game. Like, if they can't prevent you from getting the rebound and putting it back up and scoring, that's exactly what JV does extremely well, right? And if JV is able to present a body or a presence in front of SGA, you got to leave him in there. Like, you're not going to score a lot of fast break points against this team. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They don't turn the ball over. They don't let you capitalize off their turnover. So you have to win the half-court game, which is the NBA anyways. You talk about making Shea guard. I talk about getting the ball out of Shea's hand. Don't foul. Don't let him go to the hole just one-on-one with her. Build a wall the same way you build against Giannis, the same way teams build walls against Zion. That's what you have to do with SGA. He's not trying to put up three-pointers all game long. He is trying to get to the paint. He averages 33, 8, and 4 against the Pelicans this season. Now, three of them were lost, but what happened in the games that they won were the games where they made him take a lot of shots and they made him ineffective. He got to the free throw line at 12 per game, so Herb can't pick up the ticky-tack reach-in foul in the first 3 seconds of the game. Like, you've got to play honest defense, and you got to have help. Like, the nail guy, the help guy, everyone's got to be there to be the wall, more so than, oh, Herb got beat, let me go try to recover. Like, that can't happen versus a team like this in a game like this, right? Take the ball out of the best player's hands. You talk about it, you tweet about it at the beginning of the Minnesota game and why they start off so successfully. The Pelicans were like, nah, not today. And like, somebody else is going to have to beat us. And for the most part, that worked until the second half when Cat got going, things like that. Well, there's no Cat on OKC. Like, it starts and ends with SGA. You got some nice role players and things like that, but there's not a Karl Anthony Towns on this particular Thunder team. So you've got to sell out to stop Shea, in my opinion. The other thing that is extremely important for this team is you have to value the basketball. You cannot turn over the basketball in the most crucial times. You cannot turn off the basketball all game long.
So what you're saying is when you get a rebound, make sure you look to your left or your right, and the guards are reaching for the ball. Is what you're saying to do? Okay.
OKC is 6th best in the league in the turnover. So they don't turn it over. The Pels are 18th worst in the league. They're turning the ball over. The Pels are 2nd in the NBA in steals. Oh yeah, the Thunder are 4th in the NBA in steals. Like, they are trying to take the ball, they are trying to go in transition, and they're trying to score, right? Like, they are the 2nd best team in points off turnovers. So you have to value the basketball. It's the playoff. This is do or die. There's no more not boxing out on a free throw rebound. There's no more, I'm just going to dribble it up. Oh, wait, someone Jose Alvarado'd me. Like, you have got to have your mind locked in, or you will be going home early, right? Like, the Thunder can absolutely beat this team in the Smoothie King Center. You saw it about a month ago. The exact same team. And so if you don't come out with your mind made up that you're not going home, you're going to either Minnesota or you're going to LA, you will be going home shortly, right? And so those are the keys to the game. What else are you thinking of as this Pels play-in matchup, do-or-die matchup quickly approaches this week?
I just think that the energy has to be there. This is not, regular season. This is not, the preseason. Like, this is one game, and one game can determine whether people lose jobs, people lose spots and rotations, people are shipped off from the team. A lot of decisions can be made, and your season can come down to: did you run? Did you hustle back on defense? Did you protect the ball? Did you box out at the rebound? Did you come with energy, or did you just wait, and go through the motions? Like, a lot of things can go wrong in a one single elimination game. So if the Pels don't come out with the intensity, and listen, it can't just be Brandon Ingram. We saw it last night against Minnesota, yesterday with Minnesota. He can bring it and decide, hey, look, I'm going to be the best player on the floor today. Brandon Ingram was the best player on the floor last night, and nobody is talking about it because they lost the game. So it can't just be Brandon Ingram. It has to be CJ has to come out and be the veteran that he is. Trey Murphy has to be aggressive, take the shots that are open. Herb has to continue to cut with aggression and play defense and be smart, and play make as well. And you have to feed JV and get it there. And I'm calling out Willie. Willie Green has to be able to say, listen, if something is not working, you have to be able to relinquish your pride and relinquish your ways and do what's best for the team. Go into the bench, give Jackson a shot if JV gets in foul trouble or whatever the case is. Don't go back into the things that have hurt you throughout the entire season, because in one game, everything that you have worked for the past 2 years can be thrown away. Because if I like to think if the Pelicans lose this game, it won't be pretty. It's not going to be pretty in the Twitter streets. It's not going to be pretty in the New Orleans streets, as far as like people and rumors and things going. So I think the Pelicans can do it. They obviously have the talent. It's about the coaching and the energy and the attention to detail. So I think they get it though, bro. I do think they get it.
We'll see. Again, apparently that was a fiery speech. I don't know if it was the "you gotta fight," but apparently there was a big speech in the locker room from Willie Green leaving that game. And for a guy who nobody really talks about him raising his voice, apparently it was felt in the locker room. So we'll see. And to your point, you're not calling out Willie Green, you're calling him up. So
calling him up.
We shall see. We shall see. Again, everything the Pels want is still in front of them. Best case scenario, you match up with the MVP in the first round, but it starts Wednesday night. Burst the Thunder. What you got left for the people, Garrick?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give somebody a smile today. One and done, win or go home. Simple as that. Got to play better. As always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow us on Twitter at PelsPod and on IG at Pels Podcast. And most importantly, subscribe to NewOrleans.network. And we'll see you guys next week, man. Hopefully for a win.